Back in early November 2010, a very intriguing post appeared out of nowhere on the famous Japanese online forum 2cheech. The post opened by bluntly declaring that the author was someone from the future, the year 2062 to be exact. The reason for traveling back to 2010, they claimed, was to investigate something extremely important. At the end of the post, the person left a strange sequence of characters resembling a secret language, stating directly that this was advice for modern humans. The text included written characters as well as Japanese pronunciation guides. Through analysis by internet users, its meaning was deciphered as "go to the mountains." Around 2010, self-proclaimed time travelers weren't too common, so most people just brushed off the 2062 prediction as an internet joke or prank. That is, until March 11, 2011, the very next year, when Japan experienced its first ever earthquake exceeding 9.0 on the Richter scale. This record-breaking quake triggered the highest tsunami waves in history, devastating over 500 kilometers of coastline on both sides. It was then that people began recalling the advice from 2062 with shock. This wasn't the only time 2062 had accurately predicted a disastrous event beforehand. More alarmingly, 2062 also foretold an immensely severe earthquake striking in the not-so-distant future. Could this really be a warning from 2062 to humanity? Today, let's discuss the predictions of the 2062 future person. Ever since accurately predicting the events of March 11th, the 2062 poster on the 2CH forum gained immense attention. But strangely, after this rise to fame, 2062 mysteriously vanished. It wasn't until July 2011 that they resurfaced on the forum. During this reappearance, 2062 briefly answered some questions from users, then in a final post mentioned they would soon have to leave this space-time again. However, they promised to return 5 years later in April 2016, warning that a major event would occur that month and advising people to prepare. True to their word, 5 years later in April 2016, 2062 reappeared. But bizarrely, one day before on April 14th, the Kumamoto earthquake had already struck Japan. This turned out to be the very major event for April that 2062 had forewarned about. When 2062 showed up again on the forum, there were swarms of users desperately asking how they could so accurately predict disasters. But 2062 largely ignored their questions, only briefly stating they had to leave once more, but would return exactly 1 month later on May 17th. Many speculated that, following the pattern, another disaster was bound to happen right before May 17th. Sure enough, on May 16th, an earthquake hit Ibaraki Prefecture in Japan. Although much smaller in scale compared to March 11th and Kumamoto, this further convinced numerous online users that 2062 was indeed a time traveler from the future. Some even started calling 2062 the Master Doomsayer.
Once people started believing 2062 was truly from the future, the biggest question on everyone's mind was, how exactly did this future person transcend space-time? On this, 2062 explained. According to 2062's knowledge, humanity in the future has invented a time machine model called the VCX 5000. It has a rather sleek, electric vehicle-like appearance. 10 years after the VCX 5000 emerged, the G+ NXK 6290 model, capable of traveling into the past, was also created. It was this latter machine that allowed 2062 to journey into our present space-time. So 2062 didn't consciously transcend, but rather used an embodied physical method. Currently, these time machines are critical assets belonging to an organization called the Time Management Bureau. To maintain space-time stability, the Bureau has instituted a strict set of temporal rules that all time travelers must follow without exception. Violating the rules is considered a criminal offense with grave consequences. It's because of these temporal rules that there are certain questions 2062 cannot answer, like providing future lottery numbers. Aside from the rules, time travelers must also be mindful of space-time's self-correcting effects. Each mission has a limited window where the traveler can remain in the past before being forced to return to their original timeline or risk losing their life. This self-return mechanism is why 2062 keeps disappearing intermittently. Notably, 2062 mentioned that time flows linearly, so if a past traveler interferes with something they shouldn't, like killing their own grandfather, it won't make them instantly vanish. However, the self-correcting effect will eventually erase the entire violation event and any related changes. On the surface, it may just appear as a plausible accidental death. For example, if 2062 went back and killed their own grandfather, when they returned to their original timeline, some unintended incident would claim 2062's life, appearing as a normal death to outside observers. Speaking of unintended deaths, there's one major looming issue everyone is worried about these days: World War III. Before 2030, in this Asian region, two nations engaged in a long-standing, unresolved conflict that ultimately spiraled into World War III. This war seemed to have dragged most Asian countries into the fighting. The US, Russia, the Middle East, and some European nations also joined the fray. Contrary to expectations of nuclear weapons, World War III employed chemical weapons instead, but the casualties were no less devastating. After the war, many countries, even Japan, barely managed to remain in existence following this cataclysmic destruction. Surprisingly, India emerged as the world's most powerful nation, far outpacing others in science and technology. India's population exploded past 5.5 billion, attracting global talent. They even discovered a new energy source that could be wirelessly transmitted from satellites to Earth. With this space-based energy, humanity no longer needed oil and minerals, economically crippling the oil-exporting Middle Eastern nations. But for India, this opened up more resources for further research. Under India's leadership, the world transitioned into a new era. However, the widespread chemical weapons usage severely damaged the natural ecosystem through contaminated rainfall washing into lands and oceans. The genes of survivors mutated, making alcohol and seafood consumption potentially lethal. 2062 mentioned greatly admiring our present era for freely enjoying seafood in restaurants. With such extreme surface devastation, many migrated underground into subterranean cities, mirroring those above, with skyscrapers, malls, and even subways. The wealthy could choose between relocating underground or to elevated cities in the sky. In both underground and aerial cities, robots were ubiquitous due to the labor shortage from population decline after the war. Driven by immense economic incentives, nations like Japan became world leaders in robotics and manufacturing, with its GDP ranking third globally. As robots replaced human labor, lifestyles drastically transformed. Most worked from home, rarely went out even on holidays, and conducted all shopping online. Education also evolved with artificial intelligence, digitizing theoretical knowledge, reducing school to 2 days a week while emphasizing applied learning over rote memorization. While people hoped the end of the war would usher in an era of peace and happiness, dangers always lurk where you least expect them. Perhaps because 2062 accurately foretold several disasters, people became particularly inclined to believe their warnings. From 2016 until now, 2062 has not reappeared on the forum. However, the final future-related message they left mentioned that a major event would occur in 2024, without specifying what it was. Notably, 2062 had previously warned that World War III would happen before 2030. This led many to speculate, could the supposed 2024 event be the start of this catastrophic global conflict? Thank you all for watching. If you'd like, you can subscribe to catch our future videos, or if you have more time, feel free to check out some of the other videos on this channel.